Um, Good morning and afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're super thrilled to have you here for what promises to be an insightful and engaging session. My name is James Cross. I'm Director of Partnerships here at Emerge Americas, and I'll be introducing your host for today's webinar, Uday Gadikar, the technical leader for Google Cloud Startups. Whether you're joining us from home, the office, or somewhere else, Uday is in a really cool office out in LA that you can kind of see in the background there, a converted Howard Hughes airplane hangar, I think. Super excited to have him joining us from there. And we're excited to have you as part of the virtual event today. Um, We'll be diving into how to build a billion user product, lessons from Google's innovative engine. And we have some fantastic content that is ready for you today. Before we get started, I'd like to first thank Google for Startups for their incredible support and partnership with Emerge this year. We're so excited to collaborate with them on this webinar and with Emerge in general. You'll probably see them at some of our other events in Miami that we're hosting this year and next year. Google for Startups Cloud program gives founders access to startup experts, technical training and support, and credits up to 200,000 over 2 years and 350,000 for AI startups. I'll drop a link in the chat for those that want to explore this opportunity and get started today. Lastly, a few housekeeping items to address. The chat is open for you to interact with fellow participants and with the hosts here. Let us know where you're joining from or share some thoughts. Uday will be pitching up some potential questions to you all, so please feel free to utilize that. This session is going to be recorded, and a link to the recording will be shared to everyone after the webinar for both the registrants and the attendees. Um, Lastly, we do have a Q&A segment that will be going on throughout the webinar and also at the end. So feel free to submit your questions as they come, and we will answer them as they come in. Super exciting agenda for you today. Can't wait for you to hear from Uday. So without further ado, let's get started. Uday, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, James. Can you hear me clear?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. Before I actually go into the introduction of who I am, let's play a little game. And the way this game will work is in your chat, you can give your answers as you get them. And the game essentially is a game where you have to guess what these three words are. And use the chat to figure it out. What I'll do is I'll keep building up letter by letter what this is, and let's see who can guess it first. And then there's a little story around this game that I can also tell you. But I'm just going to pause here because this is going to go pretty fast. As soon as you get a few letters, typically people jump and get the answer. But let's see who can. Any answers already, or any guesses already in the chat? And James, you can tell me if anything pops up there, but I'll keep building one letter at a time, and I'll go slow because it's gonna, as I said, go pretty fast. Someone's gonna guess it's very quick.
So we're gonna put the guesses in the Q&A for right now, and then get chat enabled for everyone here.
Okay, put the guesses in Q&A. Maybe someone can just send a test message to make sure it's working for you all. So I'm gonna put the first letter in here, and let me know if any guesses come in here. A few more letters, and I promise you this game's gonna be over because someone's gonna guess it. Do you have any guesses at all, James, so far?
Ugh. Witches.
Not bad Halloween theme. Okay,
I
I'm gonna give you
know.
one more.
Halloween's a little
One
bit
more. I'm
over,
gonna give
so.
one more. Let's go. One more. All right. This is getting more. This is longer than most of my presentations ever have. Let's see if this will help out. Come on. This should be easy now.
Oh, we have a guess, but it is maybe a little bit of insider information for the first guess. But we've had two more guesses and three more guesses, and it looks like everyone has
What's the answer that they're
Welcome to
saying?
Google.
Very good. So I knew this was going to go really fast. And what is, so first of all, welcome to Google. I'm actually at the Google office in Los Angeles. As James said, this is where in the 1940s, Howard Hughes built a giant wooden airplane with the promise of it flying and taking supplies to support our efforts around World War II in Europe because there was a huge shortage of metals. And so he tried to do the impossible. No one thought a wooden plane could fly, and he surely built one. He built this humongous freestanding double hangar, which is the largest wooden structure in the world. And he built this airplane. And it's an example, actually. I could not have picked maybe a better location to do this presentation. It's an example of huge 10x thinking that he did in the 40s. And now Google has an office in this building. We built, took the double hangar and then built these floating floors in it, and here we are. The game itself, Welcome to Google, whoever got it first, essentially, if you think about, how you got it, if you were in front of me, I would ask you how you got it, and you'd be like, oh, it makes sense. You're at Google, so that last letter must have been Google. WEL gave it away as welcome. But if you think about what has happened, is our brains essentially have these weights and biases. As we saw the WEL, we knew what came next. We knew welcome. We knew to is typically a word that comes after welcome. It wouldn't be welcome by, and that could happen, but there's less of a weightage or bias on that. And so essentially our minds, you know, no surprise, work like large language models. And this was essentially, the inspiration for how we came up with, kind of the transformer model and, the prediction and what word comes next, and the premise of the world we're going into, which is going to be this world of exponential change based on AI, driven by a simple premise like what we just did in this exercise. And so, truly welcome to this presentation. Welcome to Google. My name is Uday Gadekar, and I play the role of a field CTO with Google Cloud. As part of my role, I engage with a whole bunch of startups. I'm in the startup team, and we do all kinds of engagements with them, including innovation workshops or executive alignment, solutioning, the breadth of everything that startups go through in their journey. As part of my job, I also try to bring the best of, all of what Google offers and what Alphabet offers into that journey with startups, and see how we can get startups, some leverage in terms of going to market and building things that could truly have, you know, huge success. In terms of my personal, I live in Los Angeles, actually Long Beach specifically in Southern California. And I've been in Google for about 7 years now. You can see my two kids there. The little lesson learned in terms of parenting that I can give out is, that actually is this year around Easter, and they still at the ages of 17 and 19 there, love to collect like Easter eggs and get money in those eggs, etc. So my advice to parents on the call is just keep it going as long as you can. And that's my dog George. When we first got him, there were people that said, "Are you sure he's a dog? He looks like a polar bear," and he still does, especially after he gets groomed. So just a little glimpse into who I am, and I'm going to walk you through another glimpse of my story in terms of my my time at Google so far. And so, as part of my time at Google, I actually was a founder of a startup within Google. So Google has this division called Area 120, which is a startup incubator, and employees can go and submit these ideas and business plans, and they can get funded to do a startup within Google. And I had the privilege of being selected, and so we did a startup. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of that startup, because it has some connotations into how to grow something that could be successful and how to use leverage to do that. And then we'll go through some content around just Google's 10x thinking and how you would go about doing that 10x thinking as well. There's 3 specific lessons learned that I'll share with you around that moonshot 10x thinking, and it leads to kind of how do you build, a billion user product. I also have some content around how at Google Cloud we help our startups go through that journey, and how we try to map to what success looks like for you in that journey. And then we'll break for Q&A as well at the end. ask questions as we go along in the Q&A area, and we can take those and answer those as we go along. So yeah, I'd love to have this more engaging. Sadly, I can't have you all talk in this format. And then in the end, time permitting, I also have 4 lessons that we have learned as Google over the last couple of years of this Gen AI revolution that we're in, and just thematic lessons learned, which also are so important in terms of like, how you would go about building your billion user product. So let's get started in terms of my storyline on this startup. And so the startup that I actually founded was called Demand. And essentially it was a startup that took the idea here was a simple one, which is Google search data is one of the most forward-looking data sets that is out there, extremely valuable to a whole bunch of industries, whole bunch of verticals, whole bunch of customers. And the goal was to bring the value of that search data to our customers. And let me actually go through a storyline, a quick storyline. So, we start our journey of what's top of mind as consumers, as individuals, on a simple prompt like this, and we would type in things. Now, if I take you back in time to 2020, like the early part of 2020, we started seeing something really incredible. We started seeing that searches for the word kiddie pool went through the roof. Now, we can look back and we can say, well, now we know why that happened. And we knew this in real time, of course. COVID had been declared as a pandemic. We had parents that were stuck at home. It was getting warmer with, kids, and they wanted to buy something that could keep the kids occupied in the backyard and get them some sun. So kiddie pools, the demand for kiddie pools went through the roof. But search showed that in a forward-looking way, in a very dramatic way. So also, searches for chest freezers. We were concerned about food supply, and we wanted to freeze things. We all on this call, I bet, was part of the search. We had this huge shortage of toilet paper, and we all searched for where do I find toilet paper, and so we saw that in search in real time. Um, so you get the story here. Even N95 masks. I didn't know what N95 masks were, but I was like, I want that. I need that, and all that showed up in search. And so the storyline was very simple. We said we wanted to take search data, make it available to Google Cloud customers, and we implemented that in a SaaS-based solution where customers can go in and they could type in, specific things. Like huge retailers wanted to, for example, introduce plant-based meat, and they would say plant-based meat and see where the searches came from. And so it was a very simple idea, but had enormous scale to it. And we had all kinds of customers across verticals of, our customer base using it, retail, travel, so on and so forth. So a simple premise, but a big idea, and we got that into a startup construct, and it actually ended up in a division of Google where we have what we call BigQuery, is our modern day data warehouse. So you can still find some of that data there. But essentially, coming back to Google's mission has always been to, and this has been true from day one, to organize the world's information and to make it universally accessible and useful. And that still remains the mission. And in that construct, we've had the you know immense luck and privilege to have built these you know 10 plus applications today of a billion plus users. These applications that I'm sure all of you use in some form or fashion. And I'll give you some of those stories around some of the history behind some of those applications and how those got built, a couple of stories around them. I'll tell you a 10x story that succeeded wildly. I'll tell you a 10x story that failed. And then we'll go into the premise of what some of the lessons that we have learned that we could share with you. So if you think about 10x thinking, it's really a confluence of the Venn diagram that you can see on the left hand side, where it's a huge problem that you can dream about solving, uh, radical solution to that problem, breakthrough technology that comes to help you build that and bring that to market. I would argue that there's no time in history like the current that we're in terms of the red part of it all, the breakthrough technology. We have multiple technologies that are breakthrough technologies. We're seeing S curves that are colliding together to give you this opportunity, this moment in time, to think about what are those huge problems that you can create these radical solutions for. And that intersection is what you're focused on. But if you think 10x, um, you know, you're thinking about, rather than coming up with incremental improvements, it's an ask to discard the status quo and just rethink solutions from scratch. Like that's the premise of what 10x thinking is. Um, it tackles, typically like we took some planetary scale problems in some of the application that's telling you about that required radical solutions and new thinking. And we obviously had or created breakthrough technology to match to that. And clearly search is one example of that, right? Where we essentially said we're going to crawl the entire web and rank all the websites based on how other websites pointed to them, not how well the brand was known. And it was kind of a radical idea, and that was one example of 10x thinking. From a Google Cloud perspective, we tried to provide you that breakthrough technology, artificial intelligence being a big part of it, and how can you the challenge is how can you take the same infrastructure that we have at Google, the same things that we use to build these 10x applications, and build something yourself. If you think about examples of
Uday,
this,
I'm going to
example of
jump in. Sorry to interrupt you there. We have a question from the crowd. I think this was maybe on the prior slide. Um, was monetization a priority? I might have Sean elaborate a little bit. Um, I believe this was on two slides
yeah,
prior.
maybe around like in terms of building these solutions, like it was monetization a priority. I mean, for Google, I mean, if you think about it, most of our applications were created back on the premise, right? So the premise of the mission being making it universally accessible and useful. Um, Clearly, we are, you know, monetization was, not the initial kind of thinking. It was how do we make it absolutely accessible? So like globally accessible and useful where you have these as part of your everyday life. And when you solve for those two, you make it accessible and useful. I think the monetization, just flows with it. Is our thinking. And so if I got that question correctly, it wasn't the initial premise of thinking, but of course, that's always um, part of the calculus.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. And please, yeah, keep interrupting me as questions do come in. Please ask questions as we go along. We may have a little delay in getting the questions, but I can always go back and give you answers based on where we were.
Perfect.
So example of 10x thinking here that was success was Google Maps. Now I would argue that at some form or fashion, every one of us use maps and maybe use Google Maps or Apple Maps, but the whole concept of let's take the entire world and and take photos and videos of the entire world and map it in some meaningful way that can help us figure out how to go from point A to point B. Clearly, there's connotations to all kinds of bigger other challenges as well that we had around like, how do we figure out, how weather plays in that, or kind of real-time views that we could use for all kinds of industries that kind of connect to Google Maps. But it was clearly a 10x idea that was launched in 2008 or so, and it was called MapMaker. And that was the initial term for it. And the whole premise behind it is, could we do this in a crowdsourced way? So could we get people to submit, you know, uh, information about the areas they live in? And so it worked really well. I mean, people, sent a bunch of information, and they all participated in this like humongous crowdsourced opportunity that they had. But clearly, it turned out that the higher, more densely populated areas got better maps rather than the sparse area. So it wasn't we obviously had some scale challenges there, but even what we built in MapMaker in 2010, actually, the city of Lahore, all this was mapped out, and they had these really terrible flooding that happened, and this mapmaker tool helped the local citizens in some dramatic ways and saved a ton of lives. And so we were already seeing some really valuable things, useful things from it. But then in 2017, Google Maps was launched, and kind of the next 10x idea was like, why would you crowdsource the data when you can truly get it from, satellite imagery and AI and the power of that coming together? And so that was the next iteration of this, and that's kind of where we are with Google Maps in its current form that we use. So clearly a 10x idea 10x kind of thinking, and I'll share how that thinking kind of distilled into those three learnings, but a success in a big way. If you take a failure, that'll be the next example. But the whole idea here being, and this is a concept that we have at Google, which is, you know, not one Einstein, but go for a billion interns. And the thinking behind this is, with the level of resources, we have, we can look at these, and engage kind of audiences like we were talking about in massive ways, which will allow us to look through vast bodies of information in interesting ways, and we can, find complex, problems and solutions for it, given that feedback from, this mass audience of a billion interns out there, as opposed to having this singular genius that has attempted to build something. And that's always been the premise of how we operate at Google, is really like aligning towards the billion interns, and how do we get that constant feedback loop that helps us, get better at scale. But an area of failure, and let me just pause there again before I go into the failure example. Any other questions that have come through, James?
I don't see any right now. We'll keep it in check.
Okay, I'm encouraging everyone to keep asking questions. Example of 10x failure. So you may be familiar with Google's launch of Google Glass, and it was 2013 or so, the early prototypes of Google Glass, and you may have seen people, a few people walking around with this device, and there were multiple iterations of it as well. Didn't do as well. I mean, the concept there was, how do you reduce the number of times you need to pull out your phone and look at your SMO, and how do you reduce that by 10 times? And the idea there was like, what if you had, the phone strapped onto your face in kind of a small form factor, in the glass form factor? And funny enough, you actually have now newer iterations of these as technology has gotten more miniaturized. You got, like glasses that actually have a lot of smarts in them now available, but this was like early, clearly early. But while this was a failure, maybe it was too early for its time, maybe too early for its time in terms of adoption of technology, but also maybe of miniaturization of technology that you could do. It had, some interesting lessons learned. It was a 10x failure, but you know, it inspired, in fact, a Googler specifically created this cardboard cutout with a plastic lens, $8 cardboard cutout, and you could put your phone in it, and you can actually have this virtual reality headset for $8. It was called Google Cardboard. I don't know if any of you actually saw that. Google actually took that and made it a consumer product. I think we call it Daydream, which was available in the Google Store, and you could actually literally plug your phone in, and it was a pretty decent virtual reality world with an app and your just general, your usual, kind of your Pixel phone or your whatever phone you had, your iPhone, etc. And then also from the sensors of Google Glass, clearly we used a lot of that technology that we had put into that 10x idea, got used in the Pixel phones, etc. Google Glass itself went into Enterprise Edition and got used, and is still being used in a lot of enterprise use cases. So it kind of pivoted, but so 10x failures also have all of its useful outputs from it in terms of lessons learned. I think failure for sure is teaches us a ton, and at Google we celebrate failure in ways so that we can truly encourage people to have that psychological safety to think big, think innovation. And so the lessons learned, right? There's three thematic things that, if you're thinking about this giant moonshot idea, this big idea that you want to bring to life, the number one big lesson we learned at Google, and we kind of follow this very religiously, is to truly fall in love with the problem set. What is the problem? And don't jump to the solution yet, right? So thinking about attaching yourself and loving the problem, not the technology or the solution, because there's a lot of, you know, um, thinking, like a lot of, I guess people try to jump to a solution or pick a technology too soon. But bathe yourself in the problem you want to solve, identify with it, obsess on it. This allows you to take it to levels of action that will truly differentiate yourselves, right? Bring your expertise, sure, but build partnerships and collaborate to better understand the problem. And that's a big lesson learned. And an example of this, is search. For example, with search, if we had to look at the whole kind of problem that we're trying to solve with search, and there were all kinds of nuances to it. So when you start truly dissecting the problem, you start saying that, yeah, search itself has huge value, but the challenges could be, if the user can't spell, it's a problem, right? And so how do you figure that piece out? You know, if they don't know how to ask or phrase the right question, that's our problem. If they don't speak the language, that's our problem. If it's verbal search, they don't enunciate or clearly speak, that's our problem. The connection that they have from their, device that they're trying to search from doesn't connect well, that's our problem. So the problem, it's so multifaceted typically. And if you can truly understand that problem and look at all the various nuances and know it better than anybody else can, loving that problem and exploring all the ins and outs is what we advise as kind of the big one, lesson number one that we have learned from this of how we build these moonshot applications. So look at the whole problem, fall in love with it, bathe in it, really understand it better than anybody else does and all the nuances of it. Number two is all about the 10x piece of it, right? And how do you approach a 10x to that whatever you're trying to create to solve that problem in point number one. So aim for the 10x, but not the 10%. And if you think about that, if you think about just some math things, right? So 10x is almost never 100 times harder than 10%, right? So the payoff is for sure 100 times more, but it's never, that scale harder. And 10x is literally easier because it creates a perspective shift that is cheaper relative to being smarter than everybody else around you. So it's literally forcing you to rethink a problem entirely, right? By definition, it's rethinking the problem entirely. It's pushing you to evaluate back to first principles, and you're thinking beyond just existing models that exist. And it's 10x means that there cannot be anyone out there able to give you a solution. You must build it, right? By definition, you must build it, and it allows you to materially own a market by having that technology that you're going to build it, and it forces technology change. Now I would argue again, the time and space we live in, there's never been a more ripe time than for 10x thinking than now. So that's kind of a big piece, and a few slides on this. There's this number rule that we talk about at Google, and I talk to our customers, which is 70 20 10. And if you think about it, in your startup or in your business, dedicate 70% of your resources, your people, your money, your time to your core business. Like what your core business is. We say dedicate 20% of the time to ideas related to your core business, right? So the incremental kind of things you'll do to your core business. But that 10% of ideas that are unrelated to your core business, that are truly the big thinking innovation things to keep you relevant, to keep you always being the one that's transforming versus the one that gets transformed, is really important. And it will involve some new skills, it may involve some new competencies, some new processes, but always have that 10% if you can afford to at the right time, so that you can then focus on what's next, what's that next innovation journey you're going to take with your startup. Again, let me pause and see if there's any questions that came in, and get a sip of water here as well. Okay. And then the other concept here is, the next thinking is not, as people would, feel like a all or nothing event. Like that would be too daunting. You got to kind of break it up into, some subsets. Like if it was one of your goals was in 10 years time to be like this incredibly healthy person that could do all these like incredible things that you can't think of, you would approach it in certain kind of steps, right? And if you don't take those daily steps, you'll never really achieve your goal. So while there's 10x, you break it down typically into like these 1.3x, 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 and the 1.3x can be broken down to sprints. So at the end of the day, the 10x delivery can be broken down into something that looks very much like an incremental approach, It just has a very large end goal at the end.
Uday,
And
we
so,
do we do have a question that came in.
okay,
Um, Curious how you build culture to encourage that 10% visioning thinking, specific
yeah.
tactics that Google has used or currently uses to do this with its employees.
Yeah. And so I think there's a couple of premises here. I think I talked one about it earlier, which is to encourage this kind of like, for example, the Area 120 story that I shared with you about the startup that I created in Google was where there was a culture created of, you know, where employees can actually feel safe, psychologically safe to go in and give their ideas. And there's system and process to take these and fund this. And so a true culture of like psychological safety, but also process that goes through to encourage this, but also truly fund these and see how they can move forward. People see those and get inspired by that. There's definitely some of that you know you can put together in whatever scale that you are in, but create that culture of innovation, create that culture of big thinking. There's no bad ideas. Failure, as I mentioned earlier, is another example where failure is as best we can celebrate it. We actually have all hands calls sometimes where people will talk about like, here's a project we did and we failed, and like the Google Glass example, and but what did we learn from it, what are the pieces of it that actually helped. And all of those pieces come together to create this culture where people are willing to take risks, they're willing to think big, ideate. Some of it also is, the facilities we have, like the facility I'm sitting in right now. It's so inspirational because of just the space and innovative spaces. And so it's a culture, it's an environment, it's a bunch of different pieces that come together, if that makes sense. And all of them are very important in creating this larger culture together. I don't know if that helped answer. If you had a follow-up question, you can definitely ask as well. James, are
Yeah.
there other questions?
We do have a question from Sean. How did you exit the startup? Was it a success? And was Google able to keep most of the IP
Yeah.
from the exit?
Yeah, a great question. So it was. We had, I think, to one point, like 40 different customers, like the largest of large customers, like the number one retailer in the world, for example, was using it. The exit was essentially the exit of startups within Google is that some group within Google will actually absorb that, and then you have all the goodness that comes out of it. So the BigQuery team is the one which is a modern day data warehouse. The data team actually absorbed that. It actually is still available as a data set within our BigQuery data set program. And so it was a remarkable success. I mean, not only that the final output was seen valuable, but just in terms of you know my experience was just amazing. The lessons learned, the part to the previous cultural question as well. One of the things that Google does is we allow for employees to have these 20% projects. The name Area 120, that actually will tell you a little bit about this. The 120 is tongue in cheek of, normally people give 20% of the time to projects, but they really end up doing 100% and doing 120. So tongue in cheek, that's what Area 120, the name came from. But the notion of where employees can actually take something that they really value and something that they're really passionate about and do it as a 20% project is also like so inspiring in terms of creating this environment and culture of ideation and big thinking. So but yeah, so that was what happened with that with the demand startup, and it was absorbed in it. And I may have, was there any other piece of the question that I missed? If I did, please prompt me again.
Yeah, I think that was it. I'll chirp if there's another one coming
Yeah,
in or follow up or anything.
great. So let's keep tracking along here. So we talked about breaking it up into 1.3x, 1.3x. But if you think about the third lesson learned, and I'm going to tell you a story about this, but essentially thematically it says is tackle the monkey. So let's say in this virtual room, I divided you all into three different teams. And I said, here's your mission. Your mission, each of the teams, and we're going to have a competition, is to try to teach a monkey how to recite Shakespeare while standing on a pedestal, right? Each of the teams, virtual teams, I'm saying, teach a monkey to recite Shakespeare while standing on a pedestal, right? So where would you start? So each of your teams go away and you guys start brainstorming, like, how do we do this? Typically, what would end up happening is the teams would break themselves up into smaller teams and say, okay, you are the team that's going to go research on Shakespeare and figure out what are we going to have the monkey recite. So like learn, like figure out what you're going to do there. A sub team that goes and finds the prettiest pedestal and decorates it and figures that out. And then one team that is in charge of figuring out like, oh, go like where do we get the monkey and call the local zoos and see who we can get and like figure that out. And so they like divide and conquer. And part of that human nature is to divide and conquer because you want to show progress. And so you like report to management saying, we've got this beautiful pedestal created and we decorated it's like really ready to go. All we need is, oh, the Shakespeare team will say like, we have, we're going to recite Merchant of Venice and we're going to teach the monkey to recite. And the monkey team is like, yeah, we called and we like to give, they're like typically lagging behind. But the message here is tackle the monkey and figure out what the hardest part of the problem is first. Figure out like how are you going to even have a monkey speak English, let alone recite Shakespeare? Are you even going to get a monkey? you know and so that tackle the monkey is a big lesson learned, and kind of take that into your own kind of thinking of what your hardest problem is. And 10x thinking is about finding those inexpensive and creative solutions to really hard problems. But if you cannot figure out what the hardest problem is and work on that, everything else just doesn't matter. And so focus all your attention in tackling the monkey. So that's lesson number 3 of tackle the monkey. If we think about these 3 lessons and distill them together, we're saying that there's a journey that you have to go through to kind of use those lessons, and that's where Google Cloud comes in, right? So if you think of the Venn diagram of like the problem, the solution, and then the technology, like you have access to technology that is just incredible, like the time and space. I mean, we have like first party AI models, we have third party AI models, you got open source models, you got all this platform that goes around the AI, right? So in terms of for you to solution this, there's not a better time to do it. But typically we believe that we could be a really good partner in that. And so I drew this journey that we take startups through. How do we get you to success? And whatever the success definition is, wherever you are in the journey, we try to map to that. And so you think about the buckets of this journey. There's the green piece, which is the launch. Typically you're trying to launch this MVP out, and you kind of and there's at some point you really have to focus on go to market, and how do you do co-marketing, and how do you ride on the back of a giant, in terms of like getting our customers who may be your customers to see the value and use our army of salespeople to maybe get that leverage to get the word out, get your value out. And then there's that continuous iteration that you have, right, around 10x thinking, the red pieces of it, the one Google solutioning, the shared best practices. So I kind of told you some of those, the 10x best practices that we have, which we constantly work with our customers on and keep them honest to. The construct that we use for a lot of these is what I call innovation workshops. And I do a lot of these, a lot of our team members do it, which is we work with startups to really dissect their business and help them ideate on the art of the possible. So it's when we do innovation workshops, and there's various ways of actually qualifying for one, you would then sit with someone like myself, and like over maybe like a 3-hour session face to face, and then we first dissect your business and really try to understand your biggest challenges, opportunities, your business model, your customers, your competition, and like really look at you very, very closely like a VC would for a startup. We come with our own perspectives, and we challenge some premises, and we try to figure out like how do we ideate together and kind of think big. And we tell you what lessons learned are with Gen AI. We tell you things that are happening in your vertical, other customer examples, and then we come to a common conclusion around what are those 1 or 2 things that could be either big bets or low hanging fruit, high value, high effort, or high value, low effort. We actually tabulate that, and then we help you navigate this journey. And depending where you are, maybe you need help with launch, maybe you need help with go to market stuff, maybe you need help with kind of the 70 20 10, the 10 piece of it, and so we can help you ideate on that. So it, these are efforts that Google Cloud leans in with our startups to bring to bear, and that is how you could take all those big moonshot 10x thinking principles and bring to life with us being your partner. So again, let me pause there, and I'll
Yep.
go through some of these facets of the journey as well. But let me see if there's any comments or questions.
So first question here is, in your experience, what is the average time for the startup journey?
Yeah, average time. Um, It's a good question. I haven't really thought of it that way. I think, typically we're moving pretty quickly with customers. It depends, and I hate using the word depends in an answer, but it depends on what kind of startup you are, what are you pursuing. You know, very often I've seen startups with very quick time in this journey where, they launch the MVP with our help, they build some solution. Hopefully they've done all the kind of loving the problem, understanding the problem, and all those things that I was telling about earlier. In that case, it could be like literally weeks. They can onboard into Google Cloud, build something. A lot of the technologies we have are like span like low code, no code. So that really gets time to value even sooner. A lot of it can just, scale like up and down in terms of like as you go to market and stuff. So the flexibility of allow you to create these solutions very quickly. So it could be like literally I've seen this as weeks when they move from launch and then kind of start thinking about, go to market, etc. The go to market piece itself, like for example, a lot of customers want to launch into marketplace, Google Cloud Marketplace, which is how I and my other co-founders launched the demand startup. We actually put it on Google Cloud Marketplace. So all of Google Cloud customers can essentially have it as a line item of a large deal or just use that technology very quickly with very low friction. And so that marketplace onboarding can itself take about 3 or 4 weeks because you got to instrument all your things, your solution to make sure it works in the marketplace and can be used by a Google customer. So that's typically a few weeks process, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then the iteration of it all. So I don't know the average answer honestly, but I know that it could be as little as you know like 2 or 3 weeks to launch and like to get your MVP built, depending, obviously you have all the pieces in play beforehand, so just technologically putting in place and then the marketplace as well. So we're talking about weeks. I've of course seen months. It just depends on how complex and what you're building and what the go-to-market is B2B, B2C. So sorry, I don't have a very specific answer, but hopefully that gives you some amount of perspective.
Sure. All right. Second question. Is there any criteria to qualify for one of the innovation workshops?
Yeah, so there are. So when if you're an existing Google Cloud customer, and you have an account team, you can surely go to them and ask them if they could conduct one with you. There are programs that we have. Like one example of a program is called Emerging Startups that you can apply for. If you actually go to the Google Cloud page, or even you just Google it, Emerging Startups Google Cloud, you can actually apply for that program, which comes part of the program is where you get innovation workshops if you get accepted in that program, because there's some acceptance criteria and there's also like a bar over which you would qualify. And so that comes with an innovation workshop. Um, so definitely reach out to us if you're interested in one, and we could try to navigate your account team and see if you qualify. But I think it could be really good for you to be, and we would welcome it to do it with you as well.
And and will they reach out via the Google Cloud for Startups link? I'm gonna drop in the chat, or is there a specific place for them to go? Just after.
Yeah,
What?
the Google Cloud. So if you're already an existing customer, you would have your account team that you can go to, a territory team, so you'd know who your main contact is. If you're not a customer and you're applying for credits, that could be one avenue where you go to the Google Cloud website and then get those credits as a prerequisite, and then you'll have engagement with a team, and then they could also facilitate that. Um, that's how I would go about doing it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And if you don't have an account team or you don't know who it is, then maybe somehow we can get the message to either myself or Hannah through you all. If there's a way to communicate, then we can figure out who that may be. But typically, you would know at least some contact person in Google Cloud that's helping you navigate. And if you don't, then you would start with maybe the Google Cloud for Startups to get into the fold of Google Cloud and get the credits you need, etc.
Excellent.
Okay, so So the startup journey itself, I'll just dissect this just a little bit. I won't spend too much time on it, and I want some questions at the end. So, it's building the solutions. It's about the marketplace and thinking about how you create your solutions to actually bring into marketplace. There's a bunch of data sets and models that you would use as part of this. That's one of the big values of working with Google is that, Google's a data company, and so we have this plethora of data that you can marry with your own solution to bring all kinds of value depending on what your solution is, and even models as first party, third party, open source. We really don't care which ones you use. You use the right model for the right use case, for the right application, right latency, right cost. That's all what we'll be telling you about in those innovation workshops as well. The go-to-market, co-marketing piece. I mean, think about the co-marketing piece as well. Like, again, could you do like a joint, blog with Google? Could you do a success story as you build your solution out in Google Cloud? Could you amplify that, with our reach and your reach? Could you, there's within marketplace as you list, if you put your listing in there for a B2B context, if you're a B2B provider, then, you have all kinds of tools that come with it as well to do demand generation, et cetera. So all of those pieces, and there's so many programs that fit into any one of those buckets, like the emerging startups I mentioned earlier, that could again be your leverage point that could really get you, depending what success definition is, where you are, give you that leverage to ride on the back of a giant. And I think that was, oh, just one more example, innovation workshops. So this is what they are. A quick question was asked. It's like business focused sessions, with startups. Typically it's face to face. It's about just us, leaning in as a partner, and really ideating on the art of the possible, what's next in your business. And we come out with very specific things. That's that graph on the right where we just take everything we're hearing into the opportunities and challenges and put in a simple XY axis of value to effort so that we can clearly identify high value, high effort things, the big bets, which is the light green, and then the dark green, which is the high value, low effort, which is the low hanging fruit. And so it really gives us a focus to what we can work on next in your journey towards, whatever, your next success definition is. But so we've got about 9 minutes to go. I mean, I have other slides as well, but I'll leave you with this little concept of just bringing the best of Google to Google Cloud. Like Google itself, runs on architectures that are Google Cloud specific, and so in a lot of ways, you get the same foundational architectures to build your moonshot bet, just the way any of our moonshots are built. And so it's a really remarkable opportunity and time to leverage that. And we are here in Google Cloud to help you achieve those. So I think those were all the prepared slides. Again, let me pause there for questions and comments, and anything else that's on top of mind.
We have one. We have two. If you could jump back to the last slide, but I think that this one applies. Before the question is, I like the whole fall in love with the problem, not the solution quote. How would you apply this to your experience with the demand app?
Yeah. Because we when we were thinking about the search data, we really started looking at all the nuances of search itself. Because the search data, and we started like thinking about all the various things that could solve problems for big, uh, verticals that we deal with, like retail and like travel, and it was interesting. We went down the whole route of also exploring what it meant in that time of COVID. And here's some sad stories around that because we realized the power of what was search data, where we would see early COVID symptoms. We knew where the disease was spreading. We could also be predictable in like 7 days later, we would see hospitalization rates pick up on those areas. And so we realized as we started like truly understanding all these different industries that could benefit from search data to map to it, that was the whole notion of like really trying to fall into like what is the problem they're trying to solve. Like for example, the largest retailer in the world, a big problem they had, and this we actually spoke with them about this. They said that they did not launch plant-based meat for like several months in their stores at that time. And plant-based meat became a big thing, right? And it still is. And the reason they didn't is because they didn't know where to start. Like what products would people care for? Where would they care for? And so that was all the problem statement. And we did this like incredible like delving into all those different things that we could then eventually realize that search has answers for those. And then kind of after that, we went in. So just an example of like just delving into that problem in a very in-depth way, trying to understand and talk to all the different verticals and our customers. And that's where we came up with that, with the demand solution. So hopefully that lends some perspective again.
Awesome. I have one because
Yep.
we do, and this was why I had you bring this slide up again. We have a myriad of startups in our universe for Emerge that are either international or bootstrapping. And I know it says here that the innovation workshops are preferably done in person. Do you have any suggestions for those that maybe don't have a huge budget to fly everyone out
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
wherever
sure.
or anything like that they can explore from that end?
Yeah, no, we do. In fact, we were at the TechCrunch Disrupt event, which happened in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, and we actually did a bunch with startups physically in a shorter format as well, like a 30-minute format. Normally it's like a 3-hour format. And that 30-minute format lends really well to do it virtually. So we did it virtually for the Stanford community. We did like a bunch of different other startups who've done that. So we can absolutely do it remote as well. Even the 3.5 hour version we've done, most startups are distributed and we are distributed. So we typically have like people remotely joining in as well, but physical's preferred because we love, like if you're in a room with a whiteboard and you can do this together eye to eye, there's nothing beats that, but surely you could do it otherwise as well. We have.
Awesome. All right, we'll give a minute or two for some questions to trickle in here. I am going to drop the link in the chat now that it is enabled for anyone that's interested to jump in there. Then we'll put it in the recording email as well.
Yeah, and
All right.
while we wait for more questions, I just want to just like, get the opportunity to thank everyone for attending this. I wish this was more interactive with voice than video. That would make it much more fun, but I appreciate you sending the questions in anyways.
So we have a raised hand. Arlette, can you put your question in the Q&A box by chance? Oh, I think that was a mistaken raised hand there. All right. Um, so this is from an attendee. Is there a website I can visit for more info about the innovation workshops themselves? Any testimonial success stories that you can speak to on those that just from your personal experience?
Yeah, no, we've done these with, there isn't a website that's external facing. It is a program that we, do internally there. I think there's a program website for emerging startups, I believe. So if you Google that, Google Cloud Emerging Startups, I think you'll find that link. And in there, they talk briefly about innovation workshops being part of the program. In terms of success stories, we've done this. I personally have been involved in like so many of these, and what has really been remarkable is when you start really dissecting the business together. We bring in, typically it's nice to bring in a bunch of different people from Google and then the customer. The ideation is just so productive because we start thinking about dissecting things around your current business and where you're going, and bring in the lens of like how are you, what's your moat and how are you going to transform things, and what is that 10% that you do, and we start tabulating all these in a whiteboard, virtual or physical, and then do the prioritization exercise. We found some tremendous insights into it. Like one example I'll give you, there was a startup that was in the space of social media data. So they collected all the social media data and aggregated it into one website, and it was mostly a B2C model. You can go and spend like $10 a month and get all this data and insights around social. And one of the big aha moments was this has a huge B2B consequence, and specifically financial services, because financial services would use this as an alt data set and would be able to then do hedge against this data, buy, launch ETFs around it, all this stuff. And so the go-to-market angle is where the ideation took flow. And one of the outputs of that was we got this solution into the marketplace and we connected that startup to an account team for some of the largest financial services accounts that we have at Google that are customers of ours. And there was a matching of need because they wanted social data and never had it in there. And long story short, the startup has a pilot with one of the largest financial services organizations starting now, which otherwise would not have happened. And so that's the kind of example of like thinking big, not just in technology, but in terms of go to market, in terms of process and 10x thinking, and very unique things come out of these ideation sessions. So
All right, we're button up on time. We have one more question I'll toss out there for you today. Where
okay.
can I go for really, really in-depth training on using Google Cloud to its max potential?
Yeah, no, there's a learning site, in fact, that if you go, again, you can just Google it, and the Google Cloud, there's a learning site. I wish code for you, but we have all kinds of onboarding as well as learning options in there that are self-driven or in classroom environments. So there's a ton there, and if you have an account team, if you already have someone that works with you in Google Cloud, they can point you to those resources as well. So and specific to that, there's onboarding examples, there's hands-on labs, so all of that is available to you, and you can self-navigate, or you can reach out to your account team and they'll point you to that.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. There are some great links that have been shared in the chat for anyone that wants to look into, some further information about taking advantage of these resources, and obviously for emerging startups as well. This is a great way to do this. We'll kind of post all of those in the recording and also in the email that we send out. But again, thank you everyone so much for joining us for this. Uday, thank you for being such a gracious host for this webinar. Again, we'll be sending the recording out shortly for everyone that was here and then those that were unable to join as well. But again, thank you everyone, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the future.
Thanks, everyone.